Welcome to day 3 of the Wildland Firefighter Health Webinar Series. Our goal with this event has been to pull together some of the latest science relevant to firefighter physical and mental well-being, to share some examples of how the science is being applied, and to share some resources. My name is Vita Wright, and I work for the Rocky Mountain Research Station's Fire Sciences Lab in Missoula, Montana. I'm here today on behalf of the Northern Rockies Fire Science Network. The Northern Rockies Fire Science Network is part of a national network funded by the Joint Fire Science Program to accelerate the awareness, understanding, and use of fire and fuel science. In essence, we bring people together and we share knowledge. This webinar series has been organized by several of the Joint Fire Science Program's Western Fire Science Exchanges, including the Northern Rockies, Northwest, Great Basin, Southern Rockies, and California. We want to give a big thank you to all the speakers for presenting on these important topics and to the many people who have helped us organize these sessions. I'd especially like to thank all the coordinators of the partnering fire science exchanges that I just mentioned. Today, we'll be talking about supporting a healthy workforce. I encourage you to take care of yourselves today. Stand up and stretch if you need to during the talks. Our moderator is Jim Gumm. Jim is the director of the USDA Forest Service's Innovation and Organizational Learning, RDNA. Take it away, Jim.
Thank you, Vita. Appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. I'm bringing you down to Huntsville, Texas, which is north of Houston. Part of the Sam Houston National Forest kind of surrounds my neighborhood where I live, just so y'all know where I'm coming from for you. And also, if my afternoon thunderstorm rolls in and I disappear, you'll know why. I've been looking forward to this a lot. It's not very often I sit still in one place for a couple hours and do some deep thinking and learning, and I'm really looking forward to doing that with this. I'm not going to keep you long before I turn the speakers over to you, but I do want to bring a couple of ideas into the room. The first is wellness is an extraordinarily complex idea, right? It's just, and I'm going to share you just a couple of ideas with you here to show you an example of what I'm talking about. These 2 pages are just in 10 seconds on Google, you can get 100 more of these, but there are so many components involved in wellness. And I really want to plant this flag with y'all about how complex the situation is that we're talking about. And you wonder, why are there so many things? Why do we keep talking about it? Why is it? Why is it? These are just the beginning. And there's positions to look at from a workplace standpoint. There's positions to look at it from a personal standpoint, from a team standpoint. It's just, it's a lifelong journey that we're talking about here. And you're going to hear me on that subject more than once today talking about that. But let's talk first about some rules of the road in here. I want to ask each of us to leave plenty of room for other perspectives. This is always essential for learning to occur, so please commit to that. Equally, let's keep our comments and questions professional and courteous. For me personally, I find the easiest way to do this if I speak of process or challenges or opportunities rather than talking about an individual or an identifiable failure, right? I love failure as a learning point. I love talking about it, but I just talk about it from an opportunity perspective and try not to identify people or places in it. The logistics are unchanged for today. The chat's open. Feel free to connect with each other individually and with the audience. You'll find a set of links that are going to be dropped in throughout. If you have any questions about where to find more information, drop them in the Q&A. The panel's going to be available to you in that question and answer box. And there's also an opportunity to upvote a question or an answer in there to let people know if that's really important to you. Looking over the agenda for the last couple of days, y'all have tackled some really remarkable and challenging topics. And I commend you for doing that. And I encourage you to stick with it today because we're going to bring some more to you. I want you to take a moment and recognize these challenges that could come your way and think about, what do you do if you're triggered or if something is really starting to bother you? Do you have a plan? Is there somebody you can talk to? Does sunshine help you? Go and get a cold drink, going for a walk, whatever that is. The standing order of the day today is to take care of yourself. But the leader and the elder in me, I've been doing work for a long time. I've been around for a good while in the Forest Service. getting to be a number of years now too. And I demand of myself, the people that I work with, and I'm going to ask the same of you today, that you accept the challenge of going into the deep end of the pool, to consider these set of dialogues and those from the previous 2 days as stretch assignments. Really drive yourself to see how far you can go, what you can do with these new ideas, and where's that learning for you. Last thing I want to remind you is that the thing you feel uncomfortable with, but you make yourself share and you ask questions about, may open a door for somebody else to learn or to push past something that they've been struggling with for years. You can be that key that helps them unlock the door to that. So be courageous and jump in and share your experiences, ask your difficult questions, push your envelope as best you can. Now for me, the topics of today, we've got Matt Carroll coming from IOL as our learning ambassador. He's going to talk about recognizing risk factors in the workplace. Ty Gilbert, a training technician from the Ember Alliance, is going to talk about active bystander and preparedness training. Then Iverson from IOL is going to talk about resilience. Casey Briggs, the branch chief from WIPO, is going to talk about an overview and practical application of incident kits. And Miranda Stuart from the National Park Service is going to talk about NWCG resources for wildland firefighter health. So unless somebody has questions, we're going to jump right in and get going with Matt. Come on down, Learning Ambassador Matt Carroll, and take us away.
My video is disabled here. You cannot start your video because the host has disabled it for some reason.
Well, I'm sure Autumn can fix that.
I'm sure she can.
Come on, Autumn. Show us how you can.
All right, there we go. That's
Welcome to the
better.
room, Matt. Good to see you now.
Hey, I'm here. Fantastic.
First technology hiccup.
Yeah. So thanks, Jim. Love the way you started it off, and we are going to start with some risk factors, and I'll talk about that. But first, a little introduction for me. My name is Matthew Carroll. My pronouns are he, him, and I do work for Jim and IOL as an organizational learning ambassador. And what my role has been since I started this position is to figure out how we take some of the learning that we developed in the physical safety world around FLAs, learning reviews, and apply that to different aspects of the Forest Service. And the first place that we've been trying this ambassador program is in the Work Environment and Performance Office, or WEPO. And we did it around this idea of harassment and discrimination. How do we learn differently from those situations and learn in a way that doesn't just ferret out bad actors and get rid of bad actors? Something, sure, we want to do that. But we also, if that's all we're doing, we're losing the opportunity for the ability to look and understand what components of the system are involved in that. So that's where I've been and what I've been up to. And what I want to talk with you today about is the journey that we've been on and how we've been trying to implement that. So the title of the presentation is Risk Factors. And as wildland fire and wildland firefighter professionals, we understand when we go out into the work environment that into any fire environment, there's loads of risks. Could be snags, could be rocks, could be the fire itself. And we understand that as a concept. So when we began to look into cases of harassment, discrimination, we could have looked at it in a way that we tried to assess, what are the characteristics of the people who end up as in the parlance of work environment, the AO, or alleged offender, or the AI, affected individual, we're replacing the terms perpetrator and victim with alleged offender and affected individual. So AOAI, you'll hear me referring to those things. And when we started looking into it, we could go that route. We could try and figure out what makes those two groups of people, characteristics make those two groups of people more or less likely to be in those roles as an offender, as an alleged offender, or as an affected individual. But we took a different tact, and I'm going to pull up. I'll share my screen here and pull up just a little. This is a. Did I get it? There we go. This is a chart of risk factors for harassment and discrimination, and then her responses to it. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, in 2016, they put together a task force to understand harassment in the workplace and to examine the issue of workplace harassment, its prevalence, its causes, and strategies for prevention and effective response. And one of the things they came up with was this. And when we saw this, it really helped us frame this idea that wildland fire isn't full of bad apples. We put people into an environment where there are loads of hazards. They're just not the traditional hazards that we think of. They're not trees and rocks and fire and snakes and watch your footing kind of stuff. It is more things like, if we go down this list a second, let me find I found my cursor, there we go. If we find homogeneous workforces, i.e. workforces where a lot of people look and come from the same places, workplaces where some employees don't conform to workplace norms. Sure, that's a little less, I don't see that as much. Cultural and language differences. Here we go. Coarsened social discourse outside the workplace. How about coarsened social discourse inside the workplace? Does this ring a bell for anybody? Young workforces. Workplaces with high value employees. Jumpers, anyone? Workplaces with significant power disparities. Workplaces that rely, that's the one that doesn't so much, the one on customers or client satisfaction, but every time you're with a crew, you are doing this. So I think it is kind of relevant. Monotonous tasks, isolated workplaces, workplaces that tolerate or encourage alcohol consumption, and decentralized workplaces. So what's interesting about this is the EEOC looked at, they had a whole group, a task force full of agency representatives, they had academics, they had industry leaders, they had folks from wide swath of both private and public sector and academia. And they came out with 13 risk factors, and 12 of them were like, whoa, when we looked at this, when we send people out to do fire, we are sending people out into highly hazardous work environments. We're sending young people, coarsened social discourse, isolated work environments that tolerate alcohol. You just go down the list. So this allowed us to take, as we began to understand this and the systems that support these cases of harassment, it allowed us to open the door quite a bit to understand it in a different way, rather than just saying, oh, well, it's just full of bad apples. The way we did it is with the working with the Work Environment and Performance Office, WEPO again. In 2021, they did an analysis. She's no longer here. She moved on to a new job, but social scientists working for the Policy Analysis and Accountability branch within Work Environment Performance Office. So the PAA group within WEPO, to really nail down a whole bunch of acronyms here, did an analysis and looked at the 35 cases of harassment and discrimination over the time period of 2018 to 2020. And some of you might be quite surprised that 35 doesn't seem like a big number, and it isn't. And we have to talk about what substantiated means. Substantiated means is that someone has reported harassment or discrimination happening, and in this case, harassment or assault happening. It has to be reported officially, go through the chain, and then be go through the investigative process. And there has to be enough evidence to be able to to support the claim. And I don't want to mess my words up there. So to support the claim. And that is not, and there's not a lot. And what we found is there is a lot of behavior, interactions, conflict that falls well below that line that we don't either see or understand or know about. So I want, I'm going to go into this report a little bit, but before we go into it, I really want to reiterate that we understand, and we are moving in a direction with the understanding that this is just the tippy top of the iceberg. It's like the beak of the penguin standing on top of the iceberg, kind of small. We know that there is a lot more to this iceberg than just these 35 cases. But when we looked at these 35 cases, we were able to pinpoint where some of these, and that's in the red there, some of these risk factors played a role. And so what Dr. Rash did was she just looked at the 35 cases, went through the case material, and kind of did a sociological analysis, a qualitative analysis, and then came up with some numbers just to help us understand what she found. I'll make this available. I don't want to go through it in great detail with you, but what we found were some pretty reliable trends in both the characteristics of the incidents, the characteristics of the workplace culture, offender motivation, offender awareness, and then LGBTQIA harassment that came out of that. So this was our way to so now we're tying the risk factors into what's going on right here in the fire program of the Forest Service, and we're understanding the two are aligning very well. We do have bad actors in the system. We have people, but if all we do is call them bad actors and we don't learn why things made sense to them and what in the system allowed that situation to persist, we're only going to be swatting at flies. We're only going to be taking care of individual cases when we can really be looking at the system at large. So that was a lot just to get us to this place. From this analysis, what do we do? How do we move forward from this? And we came up with a couple of ways. These aren't the end-all be-all answers, but it's where we're beginning. So one of the things we thought was to take these risk factors and create, they are 6 minutes for safety like briefing materials. They are not 6 minutes for safety, but they are 6 minutes. We took the idea of let's do some short briefing materials that people can use, maybe at morning briefing when and if they're doing 6 minutes for safety, but they might be doing some of this too. And we called it Safety Cubed. You'll notice I have another version here, and the triangle turns into an actual cube. We're still working on this, on the actual look and feel of this. This is a project in motion right now. We're not quite finished with it. But let's take some of these and put them into a briefing material. So we have a little write-up about what it is that we're talking about and what risks are associated with it. And we're taking that from the EEOC risk factors. And then there's a section down here where we're able to ask some questions. Sorry for the scrolling here. We're able to ask some questions and then provide some links to resources. So that's the intent of these, is to really just provide people with some framework, some ideas, some understanding that this stuff is out there, and then be able to link people to resources. And not only just addressing, that's sort of these safety cube material, just talking about here are the risk factors that are out there, but here's some tools we can use. Let's learn about social capital. Let's learn about calling someone in versus calling someone out. So this project is an outcome of that, understanding that these risk factors are out there and that we are putting our people in the midst of a very hazardous environment. And so this is one tool among many that we can begin to begin to address it in a more holistic way than just finding those bad actors once it raises to that level and goes through all of those hurdles and all of those accountability filters. Once it gets that, and we're talking about such a small thing, such a small number of the much larger piece of the pie here, these are ways that we can begin to address these workplace conflicts at that larger level, utilizing the engine of change, which is the people who are working and living in this stuff every day. Finally, I know I have just a minute or so here. How does this relate to health? It relates to health in that when there is conflict, whether and where there is power disparities, there is impacts to mental health and well-being, right? So not only are we does it disrupt our work environment, it is unhealthy to be in these environments. And if we are concerned about our own environment, our own health, and the health of others, and the health of the people we work with, we have to start beginning to really focus, put added focus on this stuff, because there is a direct link to both our mental health and well-being and to physical safety. If people don't feel comfortable coming forward with, if you see something, say something. If there's something in the way in our environments, then we are not going to have that suite of diverse perspectives that bring people in and bring people together to solve those physical safety problems. So as a whirlwind, I can provide a lot of this information. It'll be available. I'll have it available to you. Yeah, would love to take questions. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Matt. I do have one question in the box for you right now.
Sure.
It says, so Matt, maybe you'll get to this in your presentation. Are you saying that there are no bad apples? I do believe there are a lot of folks who are redeemable, but I also believe there are just some really crappy people out there. I think we need to confront personal responsibility and accountability.
That's a great point. So I'm hesitant. Yes, I think there are bad apples. I think there are people who willingly violate rules and violate others' psychological and social safety. Are they the mainstream? Are they everyone? No. I believe that the current practice, the current way we deal with that, if someone is seen to violate rules and or laws or internal rules, they should be dealt with. Accountability needs to exist in its current form. Needs to be, I would think, we have a long way to improve our current accountability, but I don't think this is not a replacement of that. This is understanding in all of those situations that don't end up at those levels, to understand them in a more full way so that we can understand the system's role as well, so that we can understand the culture's role as well. So absolutely believe there are bad apples. I think it's I think it's a false binary to either put people in camps of bad apple or not bad apple. I think there's people who behave poorly and may do so repeatedly, but I think we need to think more holistically about it. Traditional forms of accountability absolutely need to be there, but this is how do we hold ourselves and the agency accountable to push further and to learn more about it.
I think, Matt, you can talk a little bit maybe here about the learning that went on within our group and you in particular about how we weren't able to directly translate how we look at an accident, a fatality accident in the field, and some of the cases that you initially looked at in here.
Yeah, so my initial and very naive approach to this was, well, let's just do a learning review on harassment and discrimination in the Forest Service. And in theory, that seems like a great idea. On the ground, it runs into a lot of legal and ethical problems. Because one of the tenets of the learning review and the FLA was that we assume that when people show up to work, they don't want to hurt themselves or others. It's an assumption we all make going into those. That is not an assumption we can necessarily make when we're dealing with cases of harassment and discrimination. However, I believe that there are lots of situations in which people show up and there is conflict where people don't necessarily believe they were intending to cause harm. And it is from those examples, especially when it seems obvious to everyone else, if we can learn from why that individual didn't see that they were causing harm, we now know a lot more. It doesn't mean that traditional forms of accountability need to go away. We just need to add on that if we can begin to understand why decisions and actions made sense to those people at the time, we can then take that learning and moving it forward rather than solving individual problems. We're actually taking and learning forward so we can improve and prevent in the future. Great points.
I appreciate that, Matt. We've got another question for you, and then we'll have to shut it off here. And then there's comments in the box that I'd like you to look at when you get off the stage, and maybe you can address those. How about distributing this information? How have you found it received the best? Do people need a live presentation like this, a poster? What are you finding that's really working and resonating with people?
I think on a small scale, because small scale is all we have for Safety Cubed right now, but I think on a small scale, the Safety Cube really kind of resonates with people because, especially with the tools for the snag patch, it's just what we're calling it now. It's okay, you've told me I work in a place with lots of hazards in the work environment. Well, what are some tools I can use? So just remember when decision space or margin of maneuver or LCES came out in the fire organization, it was sea change in how we were able to communicate with one another. So providing similar frameworks in the work environment space, talking about social capital or calling in versus calling out or intersectionality or any of these frameworks, and now that you and I can connect without having to go through all the awkward of what do you mean by this and what do you mean by this, we can help provide some of the frameworks that already exist. We're not the first people to go through this. So that's some of the intent, and that plays really well. It's right there for people, and people can use it and say, oh, remember last week when that thing happened? That was this, right? That was identity, or that was whatever framework we're using. So we can gather this the Safety Cube material and put it out to you. The caveat is it's not yet finished. It's still a little bit clunky. We're working on it, and we're working this summer on it, and hopefully we will have something more, a little more formal by the end of the summer. But
so here's one for you, Matt. I see a couple of issues. Accountability is needed. Where is the accountability when a supervisor is bad? There's no formal feedback from employees to supervisors. Many temporary firefighters just quit rather than figure out how to hold their supervisor accountable who works year round with all the other supervisors.
So I can share my screen. I know we got to go, but I can share my screen one more time. And so another project we're working on is this Wildland Fire Deep Dive. You can scan this QR code with your phone and participate if you'd like. This is asking some questions about this stuff, and what comes out of it, especially throughout the summer. And you'll see if we scroll down this is going to be going on throughout the summer. It is really about finding those, especially in the later part of it, ideal future and what are your action steps. That's where we can get to this stuff about telling us, being a part of the conversation about where is this current system letting us down. We understand, we know very, very well that we have issues with the current accountability system. There are very structured and set ways about why it is the way it is. And just like so many other things, it's not one individual holding on to the current accountability process. It's many people. It is a product of the history of how this thing has evolved. We need to disrupt it, and we need to find out a thing that works for all of us. And that goes to the very core of redefining what it means to hold someone accountable, or redefining what it means to hold the agency accountable for this kind of thing, and what we should be holding people accountable for. So I think partaking in this really helps us understand that, and I appreciate it, or I invite everyone to do that. But suffice to say, accountability is a huge issue, and it is central to this, and it's going to take a lot of work and creativity to move it forward.
All right, Matt, thanks. I do want you to look in the,
take some time.
Yeah, unshare your screen there for me.
Unsharing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Really good stuff, bud. Appreciate it a lot. Matt's got a ton more information on this, and it's very difficult to do this kind of presentation when he literally has been working on this for years and has made some really good inroads with a lot of people putting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this. So I encourage you to keep dropping them into the chat box for him. Matt will drop his contact info and everything else that's in there. So your questions or ideas on this subject are absolutely needed. This is going to take a lot of hands to change the course of this ship that we're all on. Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate you a lot, bud.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
You bet, bud. Appreciate you. Ty Gilbert from the Ember Alliance, which I have to confess, Ty, I had to go look. I remembered the Ember Alliance. I knew I've seen this before. I've heard about it, but it hasn't been in the forefront of my mind. Went to your website. Maybe you can share that with folks as well. Really impressive what y'all are doing, and look forward to hearing what you got.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Jim. And no worries, we're a super new organization. So as Jim said, I am Tyler Gilbert. I work for the Ember Alliance. I am a training technician with the Ember Alliance. We're based out of Fort Collins, Colorado, but we work with partners across the country to create a more fire resilient society through fire management and community engagement. We are committed to creating a more just, equitable, and sustainable and resilient society. And we do believe that people are at the center of this and of the center of conservation and fire management. And really collaboration is the core of our work. The team that I get to work with is an excellent team of individuals, and I highly encourage each of you to come and check out our website, check out what we do. And if you see us out in the field, say hello. We do a lot of training work and community wildfire protection plan writing for a lot of different communities across Colorado. So that is really important and vital work, and I'm glad to be a part of the team that does that. So today I have the pleasure of speaking to y'all about active bystander and preparedness. I did not come up with this concept by any means necessary. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about it. Let me go ahead and share my screen here so I can get set up. So And also, before I get started, I just want to mention that I do have mentions of harassment and violence in this presentation. If that's something that you've personally experienced and are not comfortable with hearing more about, your feelings are valid in that, and it will not offend me if you choose to log off for this portion. I want to establish and recognize my own privilege. I am perceived as a straight white woman, and that experience has shielded me largely from many of the discriminatory behaviors that I'm going to talk about here. So I hope that we can all make Wildland Fire a better place for everybody and understand and recognize that we are stronger as a diverse workforce than we are as a separate one. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about active bystander here. And yeah, let's just get started with that. So what is a bystander, you might be asking? So we're going to start with some definitions here. A bystander can be anyone who witnesses something but does not intervene. That's kind of defined as a person who observes conflict or unacceptable behavior. It might be something serious, it might be minor. It might be one time, it might be repeated, but the bystander knows that this behavior is destructive and might make a bad situation worse by addressing it. So whatever it might be, this thing that you as the bystander are observing is the bystander's situation or scenario. And like I mentioned, it can encompass any kind of behavior from a rude or passing comment to actual threats of violence or harm. It kind of escalates in different ways. I'm sure, this is something that we've all been privy to, and it's something we've all been a bystander at one point or another. And something that I learned from the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network post, which was written by Maria Estrada, was the concept of an active self. So as I mentioned, by active bystander, someone who witnesses an inappropriate behavior and steps in to change or improve the situation, but an active self is an individual who finds themselves to be target of a harassing, sexist, racist language and or behavior, but is prepared, skilled, and empowered to respond. So now that we have that kind of groundwork laid out, I'm going to kind of go over what some bystander situations may be. You can see from this slide that it really varies widely. It can be a lot of different things. It's not always cut and dry. And I'm really happy to hear about the work that folks are doing to kind of identify the factors that play into it, and the environmental factors. And so hopefully we can start to change these things. So note that in some cases, the individual might not want to stand up for themselves. If there is no one else that's there that could have intervened, and it was the individual's choice not to say something, that's not something that we should shame anybody for or judge somebody for what they choose to do for themselves and what they find to be the safest kind of thing in their situation. So at the end of the day, remember that it's their choice, it's the individual's choice. And yeah, so some of these kinds of situations that we might find ourselves in can go anywhere from rude, inconsiderate, or unprofessional behavior, all the way up to like threats and actual violence. So you might have encountered any one of these, meanness or bullying, and it might have been brushed off as, oh, I was just joking, I was just kidding, just take a joke. Those are a lot of things that I've personally heard in my time, albeit short, but it is the things that I've heard that people say, oh, they kind of try and brush it off. So you might be asking yourself, well, what do I actually do? How do I actually become an active bystander? So we have these questions here, what are some ways to positively mitigate a bystander situation? And what are some ways that you achieve the status of an active bystander? So I encourage you to think back to a time when you might have been witness to something harmful or harassing behavior, and ask yourself these questions. What you chose to do or not do in that situation is kind of irrelevant at this point because it's already happened, it's already passed. But reflection is really good to do. And it's important to remember not to go out and ask protected groups their opinion of how you acted. So like, you know, you witness something very traumatizing happen and then asking someone of that same group, how do you feel about this? That can be a very traumatic situation and it's not their job to do that emotional labor. So I really highly encourage all of us to kind of think about that before we start asking people potentially traumatizing questions. And we can take this and we can arm ourselves with the tool to reflect on that personally and understand how to better stand up for these groups in the future. So I've said a lot of words and you're probably like, okay, well, what do I actually do? How do I positively mitigate these potentially harmful situations? And I'll discuss those in the next slide. But I just really want to hit on the fact that educating yourself and those in your crew, those in your professional circle, whatever that might be, education is vitally important, and doing that emotional work and labor yourself is really important as well. So what are some ways to be an active bystander? You can notice the situation. You can kind of be aware of your surroundings, kind of hear, you know, you might not immediately recognize or interpret this situation as a problem, but kind of think about it and think about if that person might need some help. And feel responsible to act if you think that it is safe for you to do so and is going to help the individual actually and not just kind of, you know, escalate the situation, because that's the last thing that we really want to do is escalate the situation and make things worse for the person who is the actually being harassed or bullied. So how do we do this? We do this through education and through kind of learning about what these situations look like and like what we can do about them. So then, as I mentioned, intervening might be the best thing for you to do. You need to do so safely to keep yourself, you know, in a position to be able to help and not do additional harm. So as I mentioned, I learned a lot from a FactNet blog post that was written by Maria Estrada, which is available online. I'll share that link later on. But she wrote a really important post about being that active self. And I really loved her kind of three-part system of being an active bystander. So it's name it, claim it, and change it. I'll kind of go through those a little bit more now. So name it, you kind of say back what happened and how that made you feel. You might not want to like talk about your feelings necessarily, but it's at least something you can say, hey, that made me feel uncomfortable, or that made me feel disrespected. You don't need to go through the entire feelings wheel, although I do encourage everybody to check out the feelings wheel because it is a great resource to kind of understand how you're feeling, where that's coming from, and everything like that. So, you know, you name it, you say what you said there was discriminatory to this group of people. And generalizations like that can be potentially harmful, or I know that you might not meant that to be harassing, but it was certainly perceived that way. So then number 2 is claim it. So you remind the individual that the behavior or comment does not reflect the standards of ethics and values that we as members of the Wildland Fire community believe in, which are duty, integrity, and respect. And so you can also bring it back to your own personal workplaces, standards, and codes of ethics. So for the Ember Alliance, like we do not tolerate any kind of bullying. We don't tolerate any kind of harassment. And I am fortunate that we do have very good channels to not only talk about that, but report it and have things positively change. And I recognize that this is not something that every organization is going to have, especially when you have very large federal organizations at play. But it is important, at least on a crew level perspective to kind of stand up for each other and to bring it back to the duty, integrity, and respect. And then the last one here is change it. So, you ask the individual for a change in action. You say, please don't make those kinds of comments again, or I think that you should apologize for what you said. Just to kind of say, this is not okay, and I will not tolerate this kind of behavior. So also remember, if you're the person in the situation who is actually doing the harassment or alleged harassment, that you recognize that even though you might not have meant something to be perceived as harmful, hurtful, or negative, that you can use this as a valuable learning experience. Please don't argue with somebody. Don't dig your hole up even deeper. You thank them for the opportunity to learn and grow as an individual, apologize, and if they're comfortable with it, I would recommend asking consent to talk with them about that and how you can avoid doing it again in the future. So my time's running a little short, but I did want to talk about preparedness. We as wildland fire practitioners, we focus a lot of time and energy on being physically fit, being strong, and being able to do the physically demanding and taxing job that we have, because it is a very physically demanding and taxing job. But something you need to also remember with preparedness is that it's a lot of mental preparedness as well. It is setting your life on hold for upwards of 21 days or more with travel days. So do things for yourself that are going to allow you to continue to do this work, and be able to put your life on hold. Make sure your animals are taken care of and that your plants are watered and such. So also another thing I want to mention is just to talk to each other, regardless of your level. Know what your rights as an employee are, and think about ways that you can improve working conditions for even the most vulnerable people on your crew. There's organizations out there like FUZ, which is Firefighters United for Safety, Ethics, and Ecology, that are working to improve working conditions for wildland firefighters. And that's a really good thing. And finally, I just kind of want to establish how vital it is to take care of yourself out there. It's a mentally taxing job. You're often expected to be the witness of very traumatic events, like entire communities and forests that you once loved being a part of, just being leveled completely by catastrophic wildfire. That's not normal, and that's not something that you can just come back from. And you're not really able to fully feel the feelings of loss that you're regularly expected to have to detach yourself from in order to actually, continue doing your job. Kind of claim it again, recognize that it's not okay and that your feelings are valid, even though there is an important task at hand. Don't lose sight of yourself. You are not your job, and you are a unique and important individual that's dealing with a lot. And naming the trauma, talking about it, it's better than bottling it up. And there's a lot of resources out there with you, or out there for you. So one last thought is just to check in with each other. It's really easy to do that in a crew environment because you're working with each other every day and seeing each other strive or struggle. So just know that there are people out there that care about you. Losing that kind of feeling of importance and a regimented schedule related to your job can affect different people differently. And so it's important to have strong networks of individuals that will be there for you should you be going through a mental health crisis. You are not your job. You are not, you're valuable past the labor that you can give and that you matter. So thank you so much. That's my presentation I have for y'all today. I really, really would like to thank the organizing team for inviting me to speak here today and for putting this series together. I know webinar or organization is very challenging and logistically taxing. So, but thank you so much for putting this together. That's all I got.
Thank you, Ty. Great job. Really appreciate it. I got a couple of questions for you. What does your research tell you as far as bystanders? Are we getting better at it? Are we getting, or is it the same? Is it getting worse? What are you seeing out there?
I am seeing kind of like what we're doing here. A lot of people are talking about this thing more. And as we get to be a more interconnected and largely kind of global community, it's a beautiful thing and a wonderful thing. And recognizing the intersectionality that each of us kind of has is really important. I would say that it is kind of a case-by-case basis, though. I don't know that I can make any kind of broadly sweeping generalizations of any kind because everybody's perspective is so unique to them. So for me personally, what I've observed, and again, I work for a very small nonprofit, but I do interact with a lot of federal and other NGOs out there. And at least from my kind of area of the prescribed fire realm, people are talking about these things and talking about how we can grow and be a better, more verdant fire community.
And what do you think from what your lived experience, when people don't engage, what do you think is the main motivator? Why don't they intervene?
You might not just have the tools to be able to do that. You might not feel safe. I know I've heard from people who, they need to keep their job. They can't afford to ruffle any feathers or to be entirely vocal about things that they think are wrong. And I can probably assume that's happening to a lot of people where, you need this job and you need to keep it. So staying quiet is a little bit easier for you personally. And that isn't always the best scenario, but it might be what's important for you. Although, again, I would greatly encourage people to learn more about what discrimination looks like, what kind of like dog whistles there are out there for certain kinds of behavior, and to be able to name it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that the idea that this is another one of the arenas of continuous learning. I was in a 3-part conversation and something happened that I didn't recognize as being an issue, and one of the participants later, when we were on our own, explained to me why that wasn't comfortable, and it completely went past me. I absolutely did not see it, and I learned a lot from it. And then when I went and intervened, the 3 of us were able to resolve it, and it was able to do it. So definitely being open to learning, even when you're an old dude like me, you keep learning. There's a lot more to this. I want to talk a little bit about that self-care that you mentioned as well. I found that really critical, and I think it's one of those things that we let go by too quickly sometimes. And I'll just talk from a business standpoint, from a boss standpoint. You taking care of yourself is a good investment for the business, for the organization, right? Because we've invested in you and all that. And I don't think we recognize how valuable each of you is. So let me just take this moment and say that self-care is good for the organization as well as being good for you and your family and your friends and everybody else. It's an investment that anybody that has ever been in a leadership role knows your people have got to be taken care of. So I really appreciate you bringing that out. What do you see as the issue there in your experience? What have you seen? Why don't people take care of themselves? What's the challenge?
Exactly what I'm looking here at the Q&A, exactly what that person said is like, you can't afford to take care of yourself. Like if you truly and really need to be able to take a vacation or something like that, like if that's your form of self-care, I think self-care gets thrown around a lot and it's a kind of a nebulous term. But I think a lot of people can't afford to make those kinds of decisions where they say, gosh, I really can't do this role mentally, but I have to because I'm a wildland firefighter and that's my job. But I would definitely encourage folks to find things that make them feel more human and more grounded, even out on a 14 to 21 day assignment. It's not like you can just say, midway through, like, I'm done, I want to go home or something like that. And that's not what I'm advocating for, but trying to find things that do help you. Like I have my own personal things that I bring with me that make me feel a bit more like a human and like a person and not just a wildland firefighter. But yeah, it is really hard. And I can't say that there's any kind of one problem that's at hand here, but definitely I've heard of people, increasing their numbers on a crew in order for folks to kind of cycle through a little bit more, to take more personal time if they need that. But when you're having hiring problems in the first place, that isn't always an option. And yeah, you can't always just choose not to make money, unfortunately.
Well, there's definitely no simple answers to any of this, but I really appreciate your input on this, Ty. And obviously you put some serious thought into this, and I appreciate that a lot. And let's go back to the Ember Alliance a little bit, talk a little more about the bigger picture. What all are y'all engaged in, and where can people connect? And are you strictly Colorado? Give us a little more on that.
For sure. So we are, I'll kind of break it down into three components because that's kind of how we structured the organization. And that's our business operations section, our fire management section, and our resilient communities and forests section. And these are headed out by 3 different individuals, all of which I highly encourage anybody to reach out to via email. All of our contact information is on our website, and I'll drop the link for the website in the chat box along with that link for Maria Estrada's post. But yeah, the Resilient Communities and Forests really works very locally as well as in the remainder of Colorado. Just kind of doing, like I said, community wildfire protection plan work and structuring together community events. Like we do a lot of pile building events for landowners for them to learn about how to increase wildfire resiliency on their own lands. And then a lot of different kind of nebulous things that they do over there. And so the training section, which I am lucky to be a part of, we do all things training. We do your regular NWCG classes. The most popular and my favorites are, we go to the Front Range Community College, which is here in Fort Collins. And we do the basic Wildland Fire 130, 190, 212, introduction to Wildland Fire leadership and chainsaw training. And then we also do kind of more upper level classes. We just did ROX or X301, 341, which is the prescribed fire implementation and plan writing class. So we were really happy to put that on. And that was kind of a national level, but our fire operations side also does travel. So we will travel. We've gone and worked in Montana and New Mexico. I just came back from Idaho. And so we kind of work all over. We have individuals who live in different states as well. So we kind of have a more national reach, but Colorado is our base of operations. So there's nowhere we don't work, I wouldn't say.
Great presentation. Thanks for joining us today, Ty. And I ask you to stay engaged in the chat and the Q&A box and jump in there when we get done. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, next up on our list is Ben Iverson from Innovation Organizational Learning. Ben, come on in and tell us about resilience.
All right, let's get this going. All right, Jim, am I up?
You are
Awesome.
building resilience through leadership that supports learning.
Very good. Well, thank you. Great to be here again, albeit from a different seat. Good to see many of you here again today, as opposed to the Jim's role yesterday. This will be fun. I look forward to today's conversation, and as we move through this, I certainly hope it will be that. I'll have a hard time paying attention to the chat and the Q&A while talking, but I'll do the best I can. I want to say this right out the gate. Unlike many of your presenters, I'm not a specialist or PhD in anything. but I am a guy that's committed to learning about good things and sharing them with others. And the concept of resilience is one such topic. My work today with innovation organizational learning is all about how we, as leaders at all levels, support learning. And that means individual learning, personal mastery, and how we can translate that to team learning, share that with each other. Much of what we're doing here this week is all about that, sharing this knowledge that the variety of us have gone out and sought, developed in ourselves, and then sharing them with you. And ultimately, organizational learning. How can we move from individual to team to organizational learning? And all of that we're going to talk about today. I hope you enjoy the ride. I want to start with this. Resilience is just one of those words that you hear a lot, right? I mean, we often say it. And at least for me, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, it's increasingly getting harder to talk about it based on how we used to think about the concept. And what I have here is kind of, you'll still find this definition in dictionaries. The idea of resilience is the bouncing back, the ability to quickly recover from difficulties, to be tough. The idea of bouncing back from trauma has been with us for a long time, and it never really sat well with me. And I think Mark's presentation and subsequent conversations from yesterday would tell you that there really is no bouncing back. It doesn't work that way. His experience changed him, and so have yours. Your experiences have changed you. So in recent years, we're seeing a really great evolution. Our ideas about resilience have grown, and not in small part from the types and duration of stresses that we've been under. The American Psychological Association recently updated their definition of resilience to this. Notice an addition of the word adapting. It's not recovering, it's not going back. It's adapting, it's growing. And this one here is my favorite definition. The acquired ability to regularly recover, adapt, and grow from stress. It acknowledges that stress is a part of our lives and that we have the ability to increase our capacity to deal with it. It's no longer about bouncing back to that imagined previous desired state, who Ben was, who Mark was, who you were. Humans don't work that way. And what I want to share with you, the ideas about resilience come from the Human Performance Institute. HPI, the institute, is grounded in Olympic level coaching. They've trained Olympic level athletes for decades, but really in the last 10, 15 years or so, they've really worked hard to transfer those lessons and coaching methods to other professions like ours. Their work was foundational in the Forest Service's Comprehensive Wellbeing and Resilience Program, for example. So I'd like to share with you some of their concepts. These are the things that I've learned through studying with them on several occasions. Also in the website for this webinar series, you'll see a reference to this book, Jim Lair's The Power of Full Engagement, where he talks about all of these things in depth. You can check that out for more learning. But at HPI, they talk about three different types of stress. They talk about everyday stress. And this is, well, just as it says, everyday stress. This maintains the capacity that you already had. This is where you're already at, what you're already capable of working through. And then they talk about, on the other end of the spectrum, is excessive stress. And this is that it can be chronic or acute. We all know what this one feels like after the last couple of years, but this oftentimes requires specialized professional interventions in a variety of forms. And we've talked about some of them this week. But ultimately, what HPI wants us to focus on is training stress. And this training stress is what builds our capacity. This is what we're striving towards, that desired capacity to handle something. And this is the arena where coaches are incredibly important, as well as peers. And what HPI teaches is that it's not just the stress that's important, it's the recovery, the oscillation between stress recovery. And I want to really iterate that at HPI, they talk about big examples of recovery, kind of like how Wildland Fire has been for generations, right? You worked hard all summer long and then you didn't work hard at all winter long. That just isn't really reality for many of us anymore. So we're struggling with that. How do you recover from big stresses? Where is your opportunity for big recovery? But HPI also teaches the little examples of recovery: sleeping well, eating well, drinking enough water, those kinds of things. And I'm reminded that every day during this presentation, during this webinar series, Vita reminds you in the morning that one of the great things about these online environments is you can get up, you can move around, you can go get a drink. How many of you are doing that? Do it right now. Stand up. Just that little act of physically moving, not overly stressing yourself physically, but it has an impact mentally. And the physical arena is the easy one, so we'll start with that. Think about a desired capacity. Say you want to run a marathon. If you go out and do just that today or tomorrow, you try to run a marathon, you'll likely experience excessive physical stress if you're not ready for it. And you'll probably need a doctor or at least a physical therapist or a large amount of time to recover, right? You might have the mental fortitude to grind through it, but it won't be without a cost. But if you approach this as an aspirational goal, you can design training stress and build capacity over time to get there. Training stress recovery, training stress recovery, training stress recovery, and build that capacity. The physical arena this is pretty intuitive, right? This isn't a surprise. But what HPI teaches is that the same applies to the other domains: the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. How might you do that? Well, you're kind of doing it right now in the mental arena. This isn't just reading books or listening to podcasts or attending webinars. Mental training is study, applying critical thinking, thinking about ideas, engaging in conversations and dialogues, and applying them to your work and life. And after that training, go and recover. Do something just for fun, play a sport, engage a hobby, do something else. Emotional, same idea. You've likely been practicing a bit this week too. Has anything been said that elicited like an emotional response for you? What was your awareness of your own response that you experienced, or when you thought of that moral injury, or when Matt talked about the existence of bad apples? Do you have the presence of mind to be an active bystander? This is all emotional intelligence in practice. And after that training stress, go and recover. Hang out with your doggo, go to dinner with friends or family, breathe. Something as simple as that. Breathe. It's incredibly important. And that just in and of itself is recovery in the microdose. And then spiritual, the spiritual domain in pursuit of a purpose, whatever that means to you. But you're in pursuit of something bigger than yourself. What gets you up in the morning? You do get up in the morning, right? Or are you slapping that snooze button over and over and over again? That might give you an indication where you're at. So HPI's concepts are important and they're great, and they've helped me a ton as an individual and as a firefighter. But as important as they are, this is just an example of what it is to be a learning organization. Wildland Fire as a whole committed to becoming a learning organization in the wake of South Canyon and the Tri-Data study. And in the years since, Wildland Fire has continued that commitment. And we have great examples of us doing just that, and some great examples of us struggling to do it. And HPI's concepts are just one way of thinking about this stuff, about resilience or about anything else. But it's one that I find useful, and it's grounded in some really good science, and I encourage all of you to do the same. Go out, seek knowledge, figure it out, adapt it, interpret it for your needs, and then share it with others. And ultimately, the goal is to use that knowledge to modify our behavior in a positive way. Here you see David Garvin's building blocks of a learning organization. Leadership that supports learning is, I think, the most important one in this conversation. I've had great leaders throughout my career who have thought outside the box of traditional wildland fire learning. Just about all of us can get into SL and I classes, but we need to think about the other opportunities for learning. And the Human Performance Institute is just one example of that. My leadership has sent me to them twice throughout the course of my career to learn and develop and grow. How can you support your folks doing just that? Individual development plans in government, but whatever their equivalent is in your line of work, are important tools for building resilience in our employees. Think outside the box and find important new ways of thinking. Who knows where it'll take us? Concrete learning practices and processes. Which ones are in place for you personally and for your crew? You PT every day, right? What are you learning to prevent injuries, like Luis talked about on Tuesday? If you don't have the skill on your crew, have you ever considered bringing in a coach or a professional trainer to help you teach form, design the PT program, learn injury prevention? We can do that. What do you do to develop capacity in the mental arena? Most crews, I'd love to say all, I'm not sure about all, but most crews do weather, sit, and 6 minutes for safety every day. But how are you learning continuously to be a professional wildland firefighter? How supportive is your learning environment? How can you make it more supportive? How open are you to new ideas? Different ways of thinking about resilience than the one I just talked about. If I'm not open to those new ideas, if you're not open to those new ideas, are we really pursuing learning? You likely support your folks in attending those fire classes, but again, think about those non-traditional opportunities for learning. Seek them out. Help your folks explore them. Just about every established program that we have had, I mentioned comprehensive well-being and resilience before, but virtually all of them started out as somebody's new idea. So, is yours a learning organization? Corey, I've got that link. Go ahead and post the link in the chat if you would. This link will take you to an examination, let you take a look and talk about your organization. This comes to us from the Harvard Business Review. Some great stuff in there. Check it out. Curious what your results are. And coming back to the Human Performance Institute, I want to talk a little bit about change and tension. Got a rubber band here. Hopefully you can see it in the camera. Tension is the energy to change. And we need to anchor off of an honest self-assessment, who we are now, the truth, and then form a purposeful vision of who we want to be, who your team wants to be, who you need to be. And that difference provides the energy to take action. All too often we stop at, man, I want to do this or I want to do that. I'd love to run a marathon. But that's often where we stop. Without that tension, do we take action to actualize, to realize that goal, that aspiration? What are we going to do to get there? HPI uses this model, 90-day training missions. Give it a shot. Decide who you want to be. Design that 90-day training mission. Find a coach if you need one. Have a plan, take action. And when those 90 days are up, whether you achieved it or not, start again, because it never ends. And it all comes down to this. Being a learning organization means that we as individuals are out there learning. We're developing personal mastery. And then we share it with our team. Peer-to-peer learning, both formal and informal. This is where good ideas are tested. I often am called the good idea guy, and plenty of my ideas get tested and they're found wanting and they fall off the wayside, and that's fine. Keep trying, keep looking, keep finding, keep sharing. And ultimately, organizational learning, from innovation to institution, grassroots idea to something that is just part of how we do things. 6 minutes for safety, stress first aid. These things started out as just an idea. And yet today, they're having an impact well beyond the individuals that originally had that idea. So, back to resilience and building it in ourselves and our teams and our organizations. Without you going out and learning, developing your personal mastery, how can we ever build our capacity for what's to come? And if not you, then who? Without bringing that learning back to your teams and as a leader supporting the learning of your crew, how can we ever build our capacity for what's to come? If not you, then who? And without you advocating for those good things that you've found, that you've tested to your organization, the wildland fire community at large, how can we ever build our capacity for what's to come? If not you, then who? Because one thing's for certain, the challenge is coming. Are you ready? So, continuing the conversation, couple things. Learn more about resilience from The Powerful Engagement by Jim Lair. Learn more about what it is to be a learning organization with David Garvin and Learning in Action. And I look forward to the conversation. Here's my email. If you're looking for more, let's connect.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that, bud.
Yeah, thank you.
See what we got in the Q&A here.
Yeah.
In practice, this is changing an entrenched belief and associated behavior that has been institutionalized for decades. We do have a pretty steep mountain to climb.
Yes. And it often feels like Sisyphus pushing that rock up the hill, but look to your left and your right. You're not alone.
Roger that. So what do you see as the biggest barrier to resilience? What are people really struggling with, Ben, in your experience?
I think and I've had a couple really, well, frankly, troubling conversations with two mentors of mine in recent weeks and months. One mentor said, I just don't have time to read anymore. And this is coming from a voracious reader, somebody that believes in learning from the experience of others. He doesn't have time to read, which means he's learning through experience. And then another, specifically about resilience, he shared that it felt increasingly disingenuous to even say the word, because everybody is just tired. And I almost stopped saying the word too. I still don't like doing this kind of stuff. I tried to get out of it multiple times with Vita, but she wouldn't let me. And it was because of this. Can I still genuinely talk about resilience with y'all? And I really had to sit and think about all of the foundational stuff that I know to be good and true. And what I came to is the realization that not talking about it doesn't serve us. The foundations are still there. It's all about how I engage in them. So another author that I love and I learned from, he talks about feeling, action, identity. If you start with feeling and you're exhausted, are you ever going to get off the couch? No. If you're exhausted, if you're worn out, if you're as Mark put it, if you've fallen down, you stay there. And that leads to inaction, and that leads to identity that says, well, yeah, you can feel the heaviness of that, right? But this author flips that and he says, start with identity. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? And just saying that, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? Remind yourself of the principles of resilience and so many of the other things we've talked about this week. And that identity has an action tied to it. What do I need to do? I haven't punched on my I've got a great little home gym with a punching bag, and I haven't punched on it in weeks. Change that. Is that who I want to be? No. Get up, move. And that ultimately leads to a very different feeling than that level of exhaustion. It's a different kind of exhaustion. Yeah, you'll be tired. Yeah, you'll have sore muscles, but good. That's the point.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it. We're going to shut down here for the break, but Ben and I work together. So a lot of people, when you do these presentations, they'll put their number up there, their email and whatever, and they say it in an almost flippant way, you know, reach out, all that. Ben's actually sincere. He definitely wants to connect with you. He is an eager, curious mind that is always looking for other perspectives and other views, and it's part of his work. He has one of these cool job titles that he didn't include on the agenda. He is called our organizational learning historian. So, and he has a background in history, and he has a passion for learning. So I encourage you to reach out and join him. I also encourage you to take a quick 5-minute break and be back for the next speaker. Thanks a lot, y'all. See you in a little bit.
Thank you all.
Hey, this is Jamie for any of the hosts. I just wanted to point out that earlier in the chat, Matt put his email and a link to that survey he was mentioning, but I think he wanted to go to all attendees, but it just went to hosts and panelists. So I don't know if you want to resend that, Matt, or if somebody wants to repost that. Just thought I'd bring it up.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I will repost that. That's in the chat, right?
Yes.
Got it.
Hey, real quick, while they're still on break, just double checking this is still working for me.
I can hear you and see you.
Perfect. I switched my setup so my camera would work. So thanks.
Yeah.
All right, let's start coming back in the room. And we will move over to Casey Briggs, Acting Branch Chief for Behavioral Health and Employee Wellbeing, USDA Forest Service, Work Environment and Performance Office. Well, congratulations, Casey. I finally met somebody that has a longer work title than I do. So welcome aboard. We look forward to hearing what you got for us on overview and practical applications of incident kits.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. Jim just shared my long title. The Work Environment and Performance Office is a relatively new office in the Forest Service. A couple of times it's been touched on here today. In that new office, there is also a new branch, the Behavioral Health and Employee Wellbeing branch. It's a great illustration of how we're starting to change, at least in the Forest Service, around today's topic, supporting a healthy workforce. So I'm here today to share a tool that had a soft rollout, some beta testing last summer. And I'll also provide a little bit of information about changes that are happening across Department of Interior and with USDA Forest Service around development of firefighter mental health programs. So it's emerging science, emerging bodies of knowledge are a beautiful thing to watch them change and grow and develop. Wildland firefighter mental health is an emerging science. We have had wildland firefighters for a very, very long time. And the simple truth of it is that we haven't, as a federal government, provided our firefighters with support structures that have been sufficient. And the changing conditions over the course of the last several years and the bravery, the willingness, the endurance of our fighter fighters and them using their voice and our communities, our agencies listening, hearing, and learning is bringing us to a place where, as a federal entity, we're doing new things and doing things differently to begin to address issues. And it's a beautiful thing to see this type of mental health science emerging. And it will be exciting to watch things evolve over the years as the academic community, as the mental health community begins to embrace this new niche. It's not the first new niche in mental health. So for the mental health community to be able to engage with academics and dive into the science around the mental health needs and issues for firefighters is going to take time, and it will develop like science does. So, years ago, combat journalists emerged and said, hey, this is causing us problems. And just like we see in fire today, the issues, the needs, the unique nature, it all needs to be adapted with the science that is there and learned. Learning needs to happen around specific needs for our wildland firefighters. So it's a really exciting time. The tools that I'm going to show you really quickly, I'll share my screen here in a second, take you to the NWCG website and talk about what we rolled out last year, a lot of learning. And this year they are being rolled out differently. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen. Somebody could report back to me that it is actually up. I would appreciate it.
All good.
Perfect. Okay, so we're calling these incident toolkits. The intent behind creating easy to use tools on incidents is to get the conversation started. So we know that over the years, we haven't talked a lot openly about mental health, about the way we're managing our stress on incidents. One thing as we started rolling these out last summer, incident commanders saying, no, this is a fire, it's an emergency. We're not going to talk about how people feel. We're not going to talk about resources. If people have problems, they need to go to HR, right? Or they're going to be sent to HR. And then on the flip side, incident commanders who were like, oh my gosh, we really need to start talking about this stuff. People are experiencing it here and now. We need to give them resources, right? So the full spectrum of willingness and interest around bringing conversations around employee support, resources, and mental health in the incident context. So we work to develop these toolkits. Right now, a Forest Service version of these toolkits can be found on the NWCG Agency Administrator Resources page. So that's what I'm showing you right now. You go right to here and you click on Incident Kits for Employee Health and Behavioral Wellbeing. And that will take you to a page that has information about the kits, as well as for right now, the Forest Service kits are posted over here. The interagency kits actually are being posted this afternoon over here on the right-hand side. So Forest Service led out with these last year, beta tested with a few teams, took feedback, learned a lot of stuff. There's quite a few pieces of the way that they were put together that didn't work, some golden nuggets. And so we're making modifications to them and then posting them. The other thing that happened this year was the decision with the Department of Interior in collaboration with the Forest Service to roll out kits to all the incident commanders at the National IC meeting this year. So they were, the concept of them was presented to the ICs, a little bit of intent, leaders' intent around that. And the other thing that's happening this year is that the interagency form of these kits will also be uploaded into the Human Resource Specialist NWCG site. So those resources are available for HRSPs as well. I'm going to give you a little tour of the kits. And I'm going to run through all of this, leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, so I won't be able to attack the questions while I'm doing the presentation. The most basic idea around these was to keep it simple and make it super easy for teams or for a unit to lead into simple discussions and have resources on an incident. So the kits by nature are purely defined in documents, and the materials are available for download and posting and utilization on an incident. So it starts here with a start here incident kit introduction document. The one pager, maybe 1.5, nope, just a one pager, and it talks about the kits. So the idea is that an agency administrator, an incident commander, and a human resources specialist, a safety officer, a med unit leader, this type of information can come from all sorts of places on an IMT. That whoever it is that's going to be leading this will read through this introduction, start here document, and have an understanding of the kits. So I'll go through this real quickly with you. Each kit really has 3 components. One is a leader's invitation. So that leader's invitation allows for whoever it is that's going to be leading out on the topic to have a basic understanding of the topic. So you don't have to be an expert on the topic to provide the information. All the information in the kits is derived from existing information from other places. So really it's just amplifying the signal on a variety of high priority topics. So each kit has that leader's invitation. So the leader can read through that. There's resources that they can link into that. I'll show you one here in just a minute, and better understand what the particular topic is, so that as they're stepping into it, they at least have a little bit of knowledge to share the information. The next component of all the kits is an IAP insert. So basically cut and paste. Last year when we sent them out, they went out as PDFs. Teams said, hey, we can't take this PDF really easily and convert it into our team's IAP template. Can you give them to us in a Word document? So we've transitioned them into Word documents. And so now it's cut and paste to get the information in for folks to be able to use on the right day, on the right incident, with the right setting. The other piece that is in every kit is an information board poster. So the idea now would be to create an employee resources board. You might post it in the food line, you might post it somewhere around the morning briefing site so that folks can see and look at information. Take a picture of a QR code or just click it and follow the links to the information that will help them find resources. So that's a real brief overview of the kits. We've got a little task, purpose, end state here. Utilization of the kits is the task. The purpose really is to provide highly accessible resources and information to firefighters to support behavioral health and employee well-being during incident response, right? It's a new step to say, hey, we're going to talk about this stuff on an incident and give people resources. And then the end state is really all about the employee experience, the Wildland Firefighter experience. The NWCG kits are developed to be applicable to everybody, not just federal employees, not just state employees, contractors too. The links that are provided in the NWCG kits are links that are openly accessible from anybody's cell phone that has service, right? So what we are endeavoring to do is target folks that may be missed, typically on an incident. And some of the resources that are available are only available for federal employees. If that's the case, then those posters, those IEP inserts, they talk about employees reaching to their employer to find out if there are any employee support tools or resources available. So this is the incident kit introduction on the Start Here document. And then for the second step, depending on who you are, if you're an agency administrator, an incident commander, if you're one of those HR specialists or like a mid unit leader, like I said, or a safety officer, there are guides for you as well. So I'll go through each one of these so that you can understand them briefly. For the agency administrator kit, so they all kind of have the same template. Why it matters. So it puts some information out there into the context of agency administrators' experiences, right? So an agency administrator has a role. They have a responsibility on a fire. The Forest Service leadership wanted to step out last year, expressing to agency administrators that this is a part of that work too. Employee well-being and mental health is a piece of fulfilling that agency administrator role. And so this speaks a little bit to that. It suggests opportunities to lead as an agency administrator. So it talks about the delegation of authority. When AAs are writing up DOAs and leaders' intent letters, there's opportunities in there to share intent with an IMT about how they manage around this topic on an incident. So there's some language in here that agency administrators can cut and paste. It suggests to agency administrators that they can talk about these topics at morning briefings. A little bit of information there, and then also suggests that agency administrators and ICs connect on these topics during those daily AAIC meetings. And also provides guidance for the agency administrators to provide all of these materials on a thumb drive to an IMT. This year, it's going to be a lot easier for teams to access the information because of the availability on NWCG, both for the HRSPs as well as for the agency administrators. So a link may suffice rather than needing a thumb drive. I mentioned earlier that all of these materials are tied back to existing resources, right? So in here, you see a link as well as a QR code to get folks to the resource guide and to the preparedness guide for firefighters and their families. So well-vetted documents. For the guide for the HRSPs, it talks about why it matters, talks about opportunities to lead, and it talks about having a conversation with the incident commander and what's the incident commander's intent around talking about these sorts of things. So encourages communication there for that specialist type position. And then for the incident commander, it's very similar to the agency administrator, except for it flips it in reverse. It talks about asking the agency administrator what their intent is around it. It provides also for that draft language for leaders' letters of intent with delegations of authority to help folks understand that they may see this information in their letter of intent. And also specifically on Forest Service fires, even if that information is not in that letter of intent, nationally, this is the expectation for walking the talk. So then again, it flips it back on its head, the information around leading at morning briefings, agency administrator, IC meetings, and in here it also talks about working with the team members, figuring out which team member is the right team member to be talking about these topics, understanding when and where you would talk about these topics, what is the right time in the life of an incident to be bringing these things up, and sets the stage for all of that. I'm going to go through one of the kits real quickly here. So just touch on stress first aid. And so here is the leader's invitation. So this is one of those folks would have a look at it. What's the topic? How to talk about it at morning briefing. There's examples of the type of statements to provide. And it's not a script. We say this in here, you shouldn't read it as a script. You should understand what it says, and then a link to the resources that are available there. And I'll just show you an example of a poster. Last year, we were putting these up on outhouses, hand wash stations, in the chow line. And some of them are in color. We recognize that you might not always be able to print in color. And so you'll see, you probably can't see here, but it says ready, and then it says green, and then yellow, and then orange and red for the black and white type circumstances. And then for an IAP insert, I'll just show you this one real quickly, coming up on time. All right, let me get this up. Okay, that one's not going to come up. The IAP is a simple cut and paste. You just pull it out of the files and you can cut and paste it right into the team's template, or if you have your own template, or just a simple Word document or something like that, you can just cut and paste it in there. So we'll drop the link for all of these things into the chat, and so folks can go and cruise around. 100%, this is a learning endeavor. We have a few topics that are available now. We are making some revisions after last year, still learning, and then there'll be some additional topics added in this year so that there's more to draw off of. We don't want to create a library that is too big, that overwhelms folks, and we also want to really hit on the highest priority topics, because really we're just starting the conversation. And so those resources are there and available. Looks like my time's up.
There's a lot there, Casey. I really appreciate you consolidating your presentation and getting it at least out in front of everybody so they can start exploring on their own. We had a question for you in there asking about the availability of these kits being added to the M581 agendas, so that agency administrators, as they're learning, they recognize this tool and this resource being available to them. Is that part of your thinking?
That question has come up a couple times in this last year, and so like I started my presentation, this is a beautiful time. It is a beautiful time for us to be learning together, applying the best science that we can find, encouraging the research community to do more study and apply the knowledge that we have. M581, I get to work closely with our counterparts in fire and aviation management, and the science, the work, the way we present as an agency, our posture around firefighter mental health is emerging and evolving. Nationally, We've got new commitments between Department of Interior and Department of Agriculture around how we are going to build a firefighter mental health program. The intent is a single program serving all federal wildland firefighters. Nailed down agreements on that in the last couple of weeks. We're nailing down how we're going to do that so that a BLM, a BIA, Forest Service firefighters mental health program is consistent, that folks will have access to the same things. And that's one way that we're growing, and how we begin to incorporate mental health information in our normal training programs. Sky's the limit, right? We need to learn how we need to do this, and things are getting better. We're going in the right direction, and big change takes time, and people and energy and effort. And right now we've got no time, right? There's some harsh realities. Money's not good. People are gone all summer, all year. It's hard work. We get exposed to hazards that create or trigger fear. There's some harsh realities around the experience and work, and the mental health implications are significant. And so we are now, as federal entities, acknowledging that and building programs to support our folks in ways that we never have before. So M581 coming soon, right? The conversation's evolving.
Good. And one of the other questions we have here for you is, how do you know the kits are helpful? What are your metrics of success? Are you getting feedback? Is there, how do you know that?
I don't have science. I don't have data, which I'm a scientist by discipline. And so not having data doesn't feel good. But what I do have is stories. Incident commanders who stepped out on a limb last summer and read the leader's invitation, looked at the kit, stood up, talked at a morning briefing, was very uncomfortable. I was there, I watched as he talked, as he acknowledged, as he was vulnerable. And then at the end of the day, him coming up to me and saying, I had a couple of dozen people come up to me throughout the day and say, thank you so much for talking about it. I didn't know that was your experience. It's been mine too. How are we going to do this? So no science, nothing defensible, just people talking about how people are talking about it. And it's creating space for people to experience things together in a more healthy way. And it's making a lot of people uncomfortable too. We have a lot of folks that are like, no, we should not be talking about this. We have agency administrators that feel like that. If you don't feel good, go home. You shouldn't be here at work. We have incident commanders. We have all kinds of people. We have the full spectrum of readiness, interest, like it's all out there. And so it's like I keep saying, it's just a beautiful time to learn and explore. And the dominant evidence, non-defensible, is that the conversations are starting to happen in different ways. And it's not just these kids. Everybody is using their voice. They're talking more. There's no more nonprofits out there that are targeting firefighter mental health. There's evolution in the mental health community that's allowing for more services. Things are becoming more visible. People are becoming more comfortable to reach out. And all of that is leading to positive change, where people will become more comfortable to reach to the services that are available, and more services are available now than ever for folks. So it's just a big time of change.
All right. So Casey, I'm going to assume that you and the people that work with you at WIPO are available. People can reach out to you and they've got ideas or questions, or they want to get involved, give you feedback on the products, all that. You're open to that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in all the products, it says that. Please reach out to us, give us feedback, help us identify topics. Yep, it's 100% a learning game, and it's going to be an evolution. So I'll
appreciate you being on with us. Thanks, Casey. I appreciate it a lot. And if you would drop your intel in the chat box so people know how to get a hold of you. All right, next up, we've got Miranda Stuart, a fire management specialist from the National Park Service. and Chair of the National Wildfire Coordinating Group Mental Health Subcommittee. Another long job title plus. Welcome, Miranda. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can see the screen right
got
now.
you.
It is the webpage.
You're good.
Perfect. I'm actually going to shut off my camera because I am in Florida and we're getting storms here. So bandwidth issues as usual. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today. I'm going to go through what the NWCG Mental Health Subcommittee is and a little bit of back history. So in 2016, there was a group of us that came together in sort of a grassroots movement in the fire community, recognized a need to remove the stigma around mental health. The writing had been on the wall for a long time, but the change had not quite caught up. So we worked with the NWCG Executive Board. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, any new subcommittee or committee has to get approved through this process. It did take us 3 years. I'm happy to say on June 19th of 2019, we were approved and we started off with a bang right out of the gates. We have representation. At the time when we started, we didn't have any clinicians now. I'm very excited to let you all know that Patty O'Brien, who you saw speak earlier, has joined the BLM and is moving into the chair position. I'll be rotating out. I've held it for 3 years. It's time to let someone else have the reins. But she'll be taking over and she adds the component of being a clinician. We're very excited to have her on our committee. And we have NGOs and state and we have feds. So we're well represented in our community, in our fire community. So if you've never seen our page, I hope you'll take some time. I'm going to share all these links out with you in the chat while we get into the Q&A afterwards. So don't worry if you don't catch it. But the two biggest things that I personally am most excited about from our group is this video right here. This is a Wistar module, but of course you can use it in any capacity. And we've been recommending to folks on those down days, those rainy days, or moments where you can find some space, open this module, get into some conversations. It comes with questions that you can talk about, but it also has about a 20-minute video in there. And you can play the video just directly through YouTube, or you can play it through here. And then here are some recommended discussions to go through and some activities. So you can directly get to that through our website, or you can go to Wistar and find it under mental health. The other piece that I'm most excited about is our Suicide Prevention Week. So that is in September. It's typically about the first full week of September. And we put out daily messaging. If you're familiar with 6 Minutes for Safety, I hope you are, we do it in that same style. So they're one-page documents that give you some things to think about, some links to take you to some greater conversations, ways to sort of engage yourselves and your crews in these discussions. And overall, that goal, again, removing that stigma around mental health. So as we get into September, you'll see a brand new link up here in the hot topics. You'll see the 2022 suicide prevention messaging. All 7 of them get posted at once. It's just the business of not having enough people to get in there and post it each day for us. So we do post it all at once, and you guys can work through them daily with your 6 Minutes for Safety or in place of it if you choose to. So those resources are in there and available. Another area that is very helpful for folks is here under mental health. Yes, we're leaving COVID-19 up because it doesn't seem to want to go away. So there are still resources in there regarding COVID-19, how it is impacting our workforce and ways to navigate through it. But you could also find resources in terms of certainty, coping with stress, other hot topic areas that we have felt are important for our workforce. And then moving down here, some useful websites. So we do have quite a few of websites for folks that are looking to find higher levels of care. And if you're not in a federal agency, you might not have an EAP, and that's important for us to address. So we do highly recommend. I've used them many times myself. These are all folks that have volunteered to put their name into this directory and provide services. Some do some pro bono work. I will be honest with you, there is a charge on most of them, but a lot of them take your insurance. And then you just clicked on this directory. You can go in and search for the clinicians in your area. COVID has allowed us to move to a resource of doing telehealth. So if they're in your state, but they're not close to you, you're comfortable doing the telehealth, then you can find different resources for you. So all of these folks, and this is what I love about this website, have some connection to first responders. It's very difficult to find people who specialize in wildland firefighters. We're a very small community overall. So connecting with somebody who at least understands our first responder community is really important, and the trauma that we can experience. Many of them have been first responders in some capacity themselves too, before going on to become clinicians specialists. So those are some of the resources you can find in here. And like I said, I encourage you to dig around and check out these different sites. I'm going to show you just a couple of them right now. Warm lines. So the suicide prevention line is a crisis response line, but sometimes we just really need somebody that we can talk to and get some support for our own mental health. The Warm Lines is sponsored by Mental Health America. They are one of the two national organizations for certifying peer responders. The other is ICISF. So Mental Health America is a strong organization and nationally well known. You can scroll down here, you'll see the different states. You can find the different services available in your state, the hours of operation, the phone numbers, and what that organization is, so you know who you're talking to. These are free services. They are, again, available not always 24/7, but pretty close to it. And holidays may impact the availability for staffing, but you can also text, and a lot of people are more comfortable with that. So these are options for you to check out if you're looking for some other resources. Another one, and this is not available in every state, so you do need to kind of check and see if it's in your state, is 211. Again, you can go in here to find resources for yourself for mental health resources. If you're new to an area, you can also call 211 to find support and resources for childcare, adult services. If you've got elder care that you need somebody who can bring groceries to that person. It's a very versatile website. Again, the mental health piece is key here and something, to pay attention to. You will have several documents that are added to this. The PMS 600 guide, this is the latest version of it. So the February 2022, it is now an officially recognized document. It was actually a draft document prior to this, but I'm pleased to say that we were able to complete it. We have updated the document that previously existed with a lot of mental health pieces. You have this guide in the documents that Corey's going to share out with you, but you can also find it here with this link. And, this is not a guide that's intended for people that are operational. So I do really want to be very specific in addressing that everything that's here, anything that is said about firefighters, this is our whole picture, and it includes the people who stay behind and cover for us when we leave. They are still part of our organization. They still feel the same stress that we do when we vacate positions and they have to cover for us. So they are critical. Every role is critical in fire. It is not aimed at folks that are operational. So I hope you'll find that when you spend some time with this guide. It's got some great tools for how to talk with your families when we go out on these assignments. Even if we have cell phone coverage, we might just be way too tired to connect. And it's important to let our loved ones and our friends, those people in our life, know this in advance and say, hey, if you don't hear from me, this is why, and have those conversations. Be proactive in your care so that when the season ends, you're in a good place with those connections. You can re-engage with them, understand that you've been busy and where you've been for the season. So those are some of the tools you'll see. A few other things that I've included for you guys to take a look at. There's what's called a wellness checklist. I don't by any stretch of the imagination expect that you're going to look at that checklist and be like, yeah, I'm going to do all this, or I buy off on every item that's listed here for me to track. use it as a foundation, a starting point. Create your own if that one doesn't work for you. But the reason the goal is so good is it gives us this visual connection to really realizing, how much are we exercising every day? How many, quality meals are we getting? How much sleep? How much are we drinking? And when we have that visual in front of us and we use that to sort of track how we're feeling each day, those dots get connected. And then you can see, like, where's that recovery for you? Not all of us get to work for the Forest Service and have the whoop band. So this is another tool, and it's worked very well for some people. It's not for everyone, but it's something to consider in how do we make tiny changes. Don't try to make these big monumental changes. Just start tracking those little things and looking for where you can make those shifts to give yourself a higher quality of life. The other things that are in there, some recommended reading and some recommended apps for you to spend some time on if they interest you. And I will also include my contact information if anybody's looking for something else that we don't have in there, or things that you would be interested in seeing on our website. Please take your time and send me some information. And last but not least, if you have not seen your new IRPG, I'm very excited about this. A last accomplishment for our committee is there is now a section in there, a brand new section in there on mental health. So take some time, check that out. You heard a lot of what's in there this week, and I think you'll be able to put all those pieces together. Have a safe summer. Take care of yourselves. Put yourselves and your family and your friends first, because folks, when the season ends or we retire, we all need something to look forward to and engage again with. This job, nobody puts on their headstone, man, I wish I'd worked more. So enjoy the job, but enjoy your life more. That's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. You stop sharing your screen for me, I'd appreciate it. There you go. All right. I can see you in there. You can turn your camera back on. So first off, thanks for the presentation and congratulations on a huge lift that y'all have been working on. That's a ton. Putting on my old Ranger hat, I was a Ranger for 10 years. I almost feel a little overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that's now available. We kind of seem to have gone from not having anything to having a whole lot. How do you recommend people navigate this volume of information?
Tiny steps. I completely agree with you. It's extremely overwhelming. If you look in the media in 2021, the number of articles that were put out about mental health in the wildland fire community is exhausting. I mean, there was so much attention on this, and now there's a lot of attention in Congress. So we have the bipartisan bill that's coming through, and every time we turn around, it feels like people are saying, hey, we're getting funding for this or positions for this, and we've got to just take a pause and a deep breath. And so not everything works, there is no one size fits all package for folks. I do really encourage you, while you're in a good state of mind, in a proactive state, go through those resources, find the ones that work for you, make the connection, create a safety plan for yourself. What are those signs that I know I'm stressed? What are those ways that I decompress? Who are those people that I can trust and reach out to? And then reach out to them now. Don't wait till you're in a crisis and call them and they're blindsided and don't know how to help you. Let them know, what works for you. And man, reach out, get yourself a behavioral specialist. We are so good at going and getting ourselves a doctor, an eye doctor, a dentist, all of that. We are not as good at being proactive in our mental health care. See somebody, maybe it's quarterly, maybe you go and you spend an hour with them and you're like, oh, I'm doing way better than I thought I was. And that's good. And you don't need to see them for, 3 more months. Or maybe you go in and you're like, ooh, there's a little more to unpack than I thought. But be proactive in your care. That role, that clinician, that's that foundation. So when you get into a traumatic mode, you have somebody who knows where your foundation is and can help you navigate back. But all of these resources that are out there, you're right, there's a lot. Take your time. Again, find the pieces that are the right fit for you.
That's great, Miranda. I want to bring the rest of the presenters on, and we're going to have a panel conversation here now where we're going to open it up to anybody and everybody for questions, but stay on, Miranda. All 4 of you come on, and we'll see everybody. So let me start with Matt Carroll. Matt, you out there? Oh, wait, I see a hand. Jeannie, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I'm wondering with so many of the things we've been talking about today, like workplace homogeneity and being overworked and underpaid. I'm curious if the panelists think with some of the latest things that have been going through Congress. So I believe there is new guidance in the infrastructure bill. And then I think there was an executive order that recently went out with the current administration about trying to make more full-time wildland firefighting positions. And I'm wondering if you think that has any traction, if that's going to move forward. And I wonder if that is the future of solving a lot of these problems. Are people going to get full-time benefits? Is this going to become more commonplace, like a normal quote unquote workplace for whatever that means? I'm curious to hear what you all think about that. Thanks.
I can take a piece of that if anybody wants to jump in. For the federal firefighters, and I know that this seems a bit exclusive, and I apologize for that, but there is a new presumptive illness bill. And it does provide for coverage for those who've been firefighters for at least 5 years, and if they develop certain types of cancer. And so that is a workman's comp claim, and there will be different coding for you so that you can be identified as a firefighter and have that coverage. As far as the bipartisan bill goes, yes, you're right. It has generated a lot of energy in terms of creating positions and changing titles and providing for mental health benefits. But it sort of came out of the chute really quickly, and we need to take a pause and find the right fit for each agency. So every agency is going through and assessing what are the right positions for them, how do they implement them, how do they bring those roles together. And it takes time, and we don't necessarily have the luxury of a lot of time, because you're right, we're hemorrhaging jobs. But hopefully those things will come together. The Forest Service and the DOI are working very closely to align our plans and to create similar positions and programs. And there's a lot of energy. It has consumed my time heavily since November, and I'm happy it has, but it's overwhelming, and it's going to take some time to do it right, instead of just throwing out a bunch of stuff and seeing what sticks.
Thanks, Miranda. Appreciate that. Casey?
Yeah, I'll share too. I think, $15 an hour. When I was 20, if I was 20 right now and I was going to get paid $15 an hour to go out on fires, I'd probably do it. That'd probably be enough for me as a 20-year-old. Where I am in my life right now, that $15 wouldn't be enough, right? That's certainly a personal decision. How much is enough? What is the job worth? What is my contributions worth? And is what the government or your employer paying enough? It's something that we don't really dive into just yet. And so helping our folks make decisions, helping them understand the decisions is something that we get to explore too. I don't think $15 an hour is enough. I don't think that solves that problem for being gone all summer long, right? Again, that's very personal. And we are exploring all of these topics in new ways. And there's some really, really harsh realities of working in fire, whether you're GS4, line going firefighter, whether you're a member of, in the Forest Service, we call us the militia. There are personal choices for all of us to make in the midst of the agencies taking a different type of responsibility for the work environments that we create and the work experiences that we create for our employees. So there's lots of opportunities in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, obligations, new authorities. If we can get DOI to include mental health claims presumptively, as they have with the other issues recently, that will be beautiful ground to cover. How do we help folks tap into, I'm going to say it, OWCP for mental health claims? in addition to reaching to resources that will be provided in the new mental health program, as well as EAP programs. All of those things that's the future, right? That's what we're learning and that's what we're designing. And we don't have time. We're out of time. People are hurting today, right? And so how do we take what we have today, the programs of today, and get people connected and get people doing what Miranda said, go in when you're healthy and establish that baseline so that when you become unhealthy, they know you. And how do we help people begin to recover? How do we help people make choices that are healthy for themselves in the context of working in a position that has the stressors that wildland firefighting does? Way more questions than answers, for sure.
Thanks, Casey. Ty, what does it look like from the NGO private sector side? What are you seeing out there?
I do know, at least the organization I work for, we try to pay a livable wage, and we do pay more than a lot of other organizations, but a lot of organizations don't always factor in where you're required to live and how much of your paycheck is actually going into just paying your rent. And a lot of the time that level of base pay and just like making your base eights, as folks like to say, that's not going to cover your bills. And at least from my perspective, I don't want to speak for the Ember Alliance, but we do try to pay our employees a wage that is reflective of where they live. But you could always do more, and trying to find, we prioritize that kind of mental health aspect where, we do have enough people where if somebody needs to go and see a mental health professional, they can sometimes do that. But that is also kind of an idyllic world to live in, to say like, oh, sorry, I need to go speak to my therapist or something like that. That's not always something that folks get to do, just from a function of how the job operates. So largely in the nonprofit sector, we do try to pay a little bit more, but that's not across the board for sure.
Appreciate that. Miranda's got a good statement in there, and it goes in line with a lot of the reading that I've been doing, that, employee burnout, and the challenges we're having with employees are, if we wait until it gets to the mental health stage, it's too late. We need to be addressing issues at an organizational. And she's talking about housing in communities where there's no housing available, the vehicles, the facilities, the support, all those things are additional. I mean, hard to stay mentally healthy, I would think, if you're sleeping in your car during the fire season. So we've got that challenge. Ben, you've always got your ear to the ground and hearing from the folks. What do you think on this topic?
I think there's a super interesting mix of optimism and skepticism. And it sounds like a really simplistic way to think about it, but I think after years of living in and observing change at a glacial rate of speed, the seeing this action in Congress, this action amongst non-governmental groups, and then this action internally, has a lot of people kind of, this is different, this looks different. And some are, I think, are responding to that with optimism and hope, and others, it's too little too late. And ultimately, I guess the way I think about this is I'm really glad that people like Casey and Miranda are in the spheres to work on and pay attention to those overarching paradigm shifts. Many of the participants in this room are part of those paradigm shifts. I thankfully am not. I'm I'm not in that arena. I don't want to be in that arena. And that really helps me focus on what I can control. And it's me, it's the eat, move, and sleep. It's with all apologies, Miranda, I didn't spend a whole lot of time listening to your presentation. I walked over to the punching bag that I haven't punched in weeks and had a workout, right? That is on me. So I guess that's what I'd say is optimism and skepticism, but also I hope a realization that somebody out there can't fix me in here. It's I have to get up. I gotta move. I gotta do many of the things that Miranda suggests and others. So I think that's what I would say.
And I would
Appreciate
just
that.
like to add, please don't ever apologizing for taking time for you to go do something that we got to get that guilt out of taking care of ourselves, folks, as a workforce.
You're right. I'm not sorry. It was good. I'm glad I did it. But
I'm glad you missed me.
there you go.
I think what Ben just said, it's so key. And Miranda was talking about this too. We're in a period of time where the resources are not actually limited. Any individual's ability to learn more about themselves, to learn more about how they need to heal. There are more resources than time out there. And Ben's decision to go over and experience some time with his punching bag was a decision he made while he was sitting right there in that chair all by himself. It didn't happen because his agency has a fantastic employee assistance program. It didn't happen because of work done by the NWCG mental health subcommittee. It didn't happen because of any other reason than he has put in the work and he has figured out what can help himself. And I have more conversations these days at the national level with our leaders in the Forest Service, both on the ground and at the Washington office, about how we have to walk this responsible line about owning our business. Like, what have we created as a federal agency, as an employer? What is our responsibility? What do we own? Because we own a lot. And how do we help people manage their own personal decisions and support them to get up and hit the punching bag at a time when it's right? It's all very, very personal. And Miranda's so spot on. It's so individual, and one thing doesn't fit everybody. And so developing that full buffet, when someone needs nourishment, that they can walk up to that buffet and do they need protein at the moment, or do they need some kale, or do they need a nice hearty beef stew? Like, what is it that you need to nourish your heart and your mind? And taking steps towards building programs that provide for the buffet for people to walk up to, and then a system that is improved so that they have the freedom and the empowerment to walk into it, to serve themselves so that they can reestablish resilience. That's like huge stuff.
Yeah.
That is huge. That is life-changing, huge stuff that doesn't happen in 2023 or 2022. Right. And that's where we are.
Yeah. Like,
the potential is really, really there, and we get to step into it. And Ben's right. It's both, there's both optimism and then the idea that it's too little too late. Right. And we get to live in that right now.
Thank you, Casey. I appreciate that. Autumn, would you turn mic on and camera for Reva Duncan? Reva, I'd like you to come in and talk about your comment.
You're going to give Reva a chance first, and then I'll close out.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Reva.
Can't
I'm
turn
on a
on the video for attendees, but her microphone is on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on a fire assignment, so I can't turn on my camera. So, no, I just wanted to say that for those of you who don't know, that today is the anniversary of Tim Hart's death. Tim was a smoke jumper who died in an smoke jumping accident in New Mexico, where I happen to be right now, a year ago. And his death was the catalyst for a lot of change. And his wife has played an instrumental role in being part of that advocacy, probably the biggest part of that advocacy. So a lot of the Casey's talked about, that we've all talked about with mental health, which, you can tie into pay, you can tie into housing, you can tie into so many things here. But a lot of those are in the Tim Hart Act, which is HR 5631, that we're hoping we can get through, that fills a lot of the gaps that the infrastructure IIJA did not include. So anyway, I just thought it was worth mentioning Tim's sacrifice. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what it takes to get the attention of people to make some really important reforms, that someone has made a very significant sacrifice, and not just Tim, but his family. So just wanted to say that. So thanks for letting me have that opportunity.
Thanks, Reva, for reminding us. I really appreciate that. It's good to hear your voice, and you're still out there doing it. Reva's recently retired too, so for those of you that don't know, but obviously
Still out
not
here.
retired.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think she's really retired.
Nah, she just changed that.
She just doesn't work for the Forest Service anymore.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. So Matt Carroll, I want you to come back in the room for me for a minute. And, you're talking about sexual harassment and the workplace culture and all those things. You've been doing this for a couple of years. What are you most excited about? What do you think we have? Give us a temperature check. Where are we at organizationally, and are we on a precipice for change, and if so, why?
I hope so. And here's why. Well, I hope so, and I think we might be. We're just shy of a precipice. And this summer and the next little bit will be an indication. We have to, in order to move forward, in my personal belief, in order to move forward, we have to look at harassment and discrimination and workplace issues, gender, race, ethnicity, et cetera, identity-based, diversity, equity, inclusion, and we have to look at it beyond. We have to shift how we account for it. So we have to shift that idea of accountability, not totally away from traditional forms, but we have to include looking forward and learning forward on this. If we can do that, if we can provide avenues to look deeper into the problem, to define and understand what lies below the waterline in that iceberg, the stuff that supports those cases of harassment and discrimination, the stuff that supports unhealthy, mentally unhealthy or conflict or challenging situations, dangerous and unsafe situations, then we can begin to make a shift. But if we're going to treat it just as a series of bad apples, then we're only going to be looking backwards. So my hope, and I don't know whether it's realized, that we can both, and this is a cultural thing and as an organizational thing, we can always bark and yell and say, oh, the agency isn't doing this and the agency isn't doing that. All of us have to be available, have to be ready to accept and be a part of the transformation in the culture moving forward that is going to work for all of us. So for me, we're right on this precipice, whether we want to jump or not, and whether we have the stomach to do it or not, I don't know yet.
Appreciate that. Vita, we're right at the end of our time here that we're scheduled for. I want to offer you, as the convener of this, a few minutes to talk to folks, and then we can stay around. I'm not in a hurry to leave, and I think several of the speakers can stay around. There's a couple of technical questions and from anonymouses in the box that I'm not sure we have the expertise in the room to answer, but I did want the panelists to all look at that Anybody that's got input on those, please go to those, but looks like we got a couple of people on the first one anyway. Vita, let's turn it over to you for a little bit.
Boy, it's humbling how much we've covered the last 3 days. So many important topics. A big, huge thanks to our moderators and all our speakers for sharing your expertise, your passion, which I came through for everyone, and just so many resources. We'll post all these resources, or at least as many as we can track down, to the event page, which you've seen the link in the chat a few times. It's the same page where you went for the agenda and the registration. And then everyone who registered will receive an email notification when the recording's ready. I believe that'll go out by day. So if you registered for day 1, you'll get that for day 1. And then if you registered again for day 3, you'll get that again. Please remember to complete the survey as you close out. It's not just, was this a good event, but there's a question in there about what information needs you have around firefighter health, and we can yard those up and share them where they can potentially be addressed. So please take time to do that. Just want to really express appreciation to you joining us these last 3 days. And please take good care of yourselves and your colleagues this season that we're heading into, and always. And hopefully some of these resources will be helpful both at an individual level and an organizational level. With recognition that these conversations need to and will continue, I am drawing this webinar series to a close.